NASA blasts off to the moon in the new age of space race. 2 hurricanes, 2 months, and a number of technical fixes in previous launch attempts were thwarted, and NASA's Artemis 1, the most powerful space rocket in history, is finally on course for the moon after lifting off from Florida early on Wednesday. The spacecraft, comprising the mighty Space Launch System (SLS) rocket and pioneering Orion capsule, lit the night sky as it rose from its Cape Canaveral launchpad at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time. The 25-day, 1.3-mile journey to the moon and back is NASA's first crew-capable deep space mission for half a century. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. The launch director, Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, said shortly after liftoff, "It was the first time that the NASA SLS rocket and NASA Orion have flown together. Artemis 1 begins a new chapter in human lunar exploration," the space agency tweeted. No astronauts were aboard the Artemis 1 test flight, but it does contain 3 mannequins and a Snoopy Somp toy gauging radiation levels and testing new life preservation systems and equipment designed for the next generation of long-duration human spaceflight. Success of the mission, which will culminate in a Pacific Ocean splashdown on 11th of December, is crucial to the Artemis 2 and 3 flights that will follow. Both will ferry humans to and from the moon, with the latter scheduled for 2025, but expected to slip back a year, being the first crewed lunar landing since Apollo 17 in December 1972. Artemis 3 will add a woman's name to only 12 moonwalkers in history, all men, from the Apollo flights between 1969 and 1972. A subsequent mission of Artemis. In Greek mythology, the twin sister of Apollo will land the first person of color, the space agency says. While the Apollo missions provided humanity's first hands-on look at our nearest celestial body, much more than basic exploration is driving NASA's return. Why the moon? NASA Administrator Bill Nelson told The Guardian last year, because the goal is Mars. What we can do on the moon is learn how to exist and survive in that hostile environment and only be 3 or 4 days away from Earth before we venture out and are months and months from Earth. That's the whole purpose. We go back to the moon, we learn how to live there, recreate habitats. NASA wants to establish a long-term human presence, including construction of a lunar base camp as groundwork for crewed missions to Mars by mid-2030s. Its wider Moon-to-Mars vision includes commercial partners such as Elon Musk's SpaceX and the heavy-lift Starship rocket that could be ready for its first orbital test flight as soon as next month. First, though, NASA must prove after a 50-year gap that it is up to the challenge of sending vehicles into deep space and returning them safely to Earth. Wednesday's launch followed scuppered attempts in August and September. Those were scrapped after engineers discovered an engine cooling problem, then were unable to fix that was reported as an unrelated fuel leak, but which was later traced to a faulty sensor. NASA's hope of trying in early October was curbed when the threat of Hurricane Ian forced the space agency to roll the giant $41 billion rocket back to its hangar. Artemis returned to the launch pad on the 4th of November and remained there last week through 100 miles per hour gusts from Hurricane Nicole. Mission managers gave a final go-ahead for launch after conducting minor repairs on electrical systems and determining a torn strip of silicon weather covering that was not a showstopper. Jim Free, NASA's Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, said there had been a robust debate about pressing forward with Wednesday's launch. Even at the final decision poll, there was a discussion about, hey, let's make sure we're understanding and talking through all the issues, he told reporters. I can tell you that the team absolutely did that. The group that cares the most about this rocket is the group making those decisions. I would never expect, nor have I heard, any overconfidence or cavalier nature. Orion launched atop the most powerful rocket ever built with 8.8 million pounds of thrust, 1.3 million greater than the Saturn V behemoths of the Apollo era. Artemis will fly further than any spacecraft built for humans, NASA says. It will travel 280,000 miles, 450,000 kilometers from Earth, and 40,000 miles, or 64,000 kilometers, beyond the far side of the moon. Orion will also stay in space longer than any human spacecraft has without docking to a space station and return home faster and hotter than ever before. NASA's Artemis program is an effort to place astronauts on the lunar surface and develop an ongoing presence there. NASA successfully launched Artemis 1 at 1:47 a.m. EST, 6:47 GMT on November 16 from Launch Complex 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It concluded a 25.5-day lunar mission with a successful splashdown off the coast of Mexico's Baja Peninsula at 12:40 p.m. EST on December 11, 2022. The program's name is derived from Artemis, the Greek goddess of the moon and twin sister to Apollo, whose namesake program first brought astronauts to our natural satellite on July 20th, 1969. The Artemis program is a renaming of several earlier activities NASA was already undertaking to return humans to the moon. These were mandated by President Trump's Space Policy Directive 1, which tasked the agency with focusing on missions to the moon. In 2019, Vice President Mike Pence set an ambitious deadline to land humans on the lunar South Pole by 2024. Perhaps the most ambitious of the Artemis mission's objectives involves using the moon as a stepping stone for a mission to Mars. Robots have done all the detective work on Mars so far, but NASA now aims to send astronauts there by the 2030s. With a future target set on the red planet, the return to the moon will be used to provide us with the knowledge and tools to better navigate our solar system. But how can the moon help prepare us for a mission to Mars, an entirely different and more unpredictable mission? Three-time NASA astronaut Steven Swanson, who has logged over 195 days in space during 3 missions to the International Space Station aboard Space Shuttle flights STS-117 and STS-119 and Soyuz flight TMA-12M, spoke about the significance of Artemis with Space.com's sister publication, How It Works magazine. The real goal is Mars, and we will use the moon as a test bed because Mars is a very difficult mission, Swanson said in the November 2020 issue. It's going to take almost 3 years, and you can't come home early on a Mars mission. It's a 7 or 8 month journey to get there, and you have to wait 15 months there for the planets to align correctly again before you return. As well as Mars, we can also use the moon as a test bed for other things to see how we can actually gather materials from the moon itself and maybe use that to make our fuel. On May 14, 2019, the mission's goals were given the new moniker Artemis. Jim Bridenstine, the space agency's administrator, told reporters on the day of the announcement that the name represents the program's goals of inclusion, representing the fact that NASA intends to land the first woman on the moon under its current plans. I have a daughter who is 11 years old, and I want her to be able to see herself in the same role as the next woman who go to the moon to see themselves in today, Bridenstine said. Then, on the 26th of November, Day 11, Orion broke the record for the farthest distance traveled by a spacecraft designed to carry humans into space and back. The record was previously held by Apollo 13, which traveled 400,171 kilometers. Orion reached its max distance of 432,210 kilometers from Earth on Day 13 as part of its lunar orbit. Another burn was performed on Day 16, December 1, to exit distant retrograde lunar orbit, sending Orion back towards the moon and marking the start of its journey home. On Day 20, December 5, the craft performed another lunar flyby, reaching around 128 kilometers from the moon. It used the moon's gravity to slingshot itself back toward Earth and successfully landed in the Pacific Ocean on December 11. Formerly called Exploration Mission 1, this uncrewed mission was an extensive test of the Space Launch System SLS and the Orion module. The Space Launch System is the most powerful rocket ever built, generating 8.8 million pounds of thrust liftoff, making it 1.3 million pounds more powerful than the Saturn V rocket used in the Apollo missions. Artemis 1's journey took it 450,000 kilometers to the moon, where it orbited 400 kilometers above the lunar surface before continuing approximately 64,373 kilometers beyond into deep space. After a mission length of 25.5 days, the module splashed down in the Pacific Ocean near California on 11th of December.